Microsoft and newspapers team up to fight Google. Over the past decade, hundreds of newspapers have disappeared, largely due to the disruption of the advertising market by large technology companies. Republicans and Democrats don't agree on much when it comes to technology reform, from content moderation to spinning off acquisitions, but they seem to agree that local journalism needs to be saved. On Friday, a House Judiciary Subcommittee hearing focused on how Google and Facebook distribute news, and a new bill introduced earlier this week has already found Republican support. It's one of the biggest legislative threats to technology to come out of the years-long antitrust debate, and much of its political force comes from the precarious state of local journalism. The crisis in American journalism has become a real crisis in our democracy and civic life, Cicilline said in his opening remarks Friday. Cicilline's bill, the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act of 2021, would allow news organizations to collectively negotiate with platforms like Facebook and Google over the terms under which their content is distributed online. Senator Amy Klobuchar, D. Minnesota, who heads the Senate Antitrust Committee, has also sponsored the bill in the Senate, and Republicans such as Senators John Kennedy and Ken Buck, have previously supported it. This bill is a step in the right direction to dethrone these digital kings, Ken Buck said in his opening remarks Friday. This is not a subsidy for the media, but rather a leveling of the playing field for democracy and free speech. What does IT mean? The pressure is on more than ever for Congress to act. In January, Google threatened to pull its search engine out of Australia in response to a new law that would require the tech giant to pay news publishers for their content. That law was approved in February, and Google quickly backed down to strike a deal with News Corporation and other publishers. While all this was going on, Microsoft issued a statement in support of Australia's efforts to protect publishers. One thing is clear. While other technology companies may sometimes threaten to leave Australia, Microsoft will never make such a threat, Microsoft President Brad Smith said in the statement last month. Smith was called to testify at Friday's hearing, announcing his support for Cicilline's media trading bill. Moments before the hearing began, Google issued its own scathing statement against Microsoft, suggesting that the company is making self-serving statements that could break the way the open web works in order to weaken a rival. Google has good reason to fear this bill, especially in light of its Australian bluff. The Cicilline bill has bipartisan support, and this is just the first blow the subcommittee has dealt big tech before it tackles more radical reforms. The highlight. Glenn Greenwald, former Intercept editor turned author of the Substack newsletter, also testified at Friday's hearing. Matt Gaetz focused his questions on Greenwald, asking him if he was concerned that a bill like the one proposed would only empower big media companies while leaving local journalism in the dust. What concerns me is that the discussion in the legislation seems to be based on the premise that the only or main problem for both local and national journalism is that Google and Facebook are sucking up the advertising revenue, and if you just solve that problem, the problem of media failure will be rectified as well, Greenwald said. Cicilline lashed out at Greenwald, saying his bill is just a first step. What didn't they ask? As Politico's Cristiano Lima noted on Twitter, the committee hardly asked any questions about Facebook. Facebook had its own beef with Australia last month, removing the ability for some users and publishers to share news content in the country. In February, the Australian government agreed to several changes that would allow users to continue to publish news, so a thorough conversation on those concessions and how they could affect American users would have been beneficial. What's next? The House Judiciary Committee's subcommittee on antitrust still has another hearing before it starts introducing legislation. Those bills are expected to land this spring. Klobuchar also told CNN this week that the Senate's Competition Committee will also start holding its own hearings on text dominance, looking into App Store fees and news publishing. Those hearings have yet to be scheduled.